you so much for being with us. We are introducing you all, Facebook family, Instagram family, educators, parents, friends of mine. We're introducing you this morning to Ravi Perry, who is running for the at-large seat with the State Board of Education here in DC. And so this is Convo for a Cause. We thought we were almost done, and with a couple of days left before the election, we were able to coordinate schedules and get Ravi in here today. So I'm Kendall Isadore. Again, I'm a teacher in DC, been here for the last 14 years, attended Howard University, fell in love with the city, never left. Started teaching science, taught orchestra soon after that, strings, and I'm a musician. Yeah, so this is people's first time knowing the non-musician side of me, but did spend some time also at GW studying ed policy. So this is a passion of mine, and I'm glad to be with you this morning. So why don't you introduce yourself and talk about your background and what led you to this point?
I really appreciate this, Kendall. Yeah, as you said, I'm Ravi. I'm a professor and chair of the Department of Political Science at Howard University. I have had the pleasure of working at the Mecca now for almost 2 years, and I live in Ward 7. Really proud to live here east of the river in Parkside neighborhood. I'm a native of Toledo, Ohio, was raised in a family of educators. My mom was a public school, urban high school teacher, taught English literature for over 40 years in Toledo Public Schools, proud member of the teachers union there, very active in opening up our home and our kitchen table every single night. I promise you, to someone who did not live in our house or sleep under our roof, because that's what teachers do 24/7 to make sure that every student has the tools they need to be successful. And my dad founded Black and Ethnic Studies at the University in Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan, both at Bowling Green State University, where he was founder of Ethnic Studies. This year we're celebrating 50 years having founded that in 1970 there. And he went on to be head of Black Studies at Eastern Michigan University before retiring. I mentioned my family because that's why I got into this race. I actually jumped into this race late on July 27th, my maternal grandmother's birthday, who was a music educator and a public school teacher for decades in Little Rock Public Schools in the mid-20th century. And one of her children, my Aunt Frances Prince, was a Howard grad, got her music education degree from Howard in the 60s, married her sweetheart, my Capra brother, my uncle, Norman Prince, after graduating from Howard, made their career and their lives here in DC. And she taught music education in DCPS for 30 years. And I was motivated to get into the race late around their birthdays. And I announced my parents' anniversary in August, in part because I was very much motivated to ensure that we did not have another at-large member who was supporting Donald Trump. It was extremely important to me that we had a race focused on the future and education of all students, but particularly students of color. And most of the students in DCPS, as we know, are Black and brown, beautiful young people who we need, each and every one of them, to have the tools that they have to get and they should get from public education so they can go out in the world and change the world. Whether they do career readiness or they end up in a college classroom like mine, they need to be able to go and perform and get an A. And I was frankly very distraught by Ashley Carter, Ashley McCauley, and her current positions on these issues. And I was very much motivated to run as well by this, what I call summer discontent, where the tragic deaths of folks like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and one of my longtime heroes, of course, John Lewis, really, made me ask myself, well, what else can I be doing to ensure that all students and all folks here in DC are really getting the education that they deserve. I come from a family of educators, so whether I win or not on Tuesday, y'all gonna keep seeing me, whether you like it or not, because these are issues that matter. I believe in the stuff I'm fighting for, and Black studies and mandating it, and ethnic studies, and so many other issues I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about this morning, Kendall.
Yes, I'm really excited. I'm excited to dive in. And if there's anything we know children need and families need and deserve, it's somebody to amplify their voices when they may not always have the opportunity to speak on the things that are important to them, or when they don't always know what they should be fighting for. They know that they want their kids to have a quality education, but they may not know what levers to pull. And so that's why we need people like you, Ravi. So let's jump into some questions. So your vision, right? Your vision for DC's educational landscape, right? November 4th, boom, you won. Where do you begin? So my question is around sort of, let's look at time. So the first 6 months out, the first year, what are your 2 or 3 main priorities? I'm familiar with the issues that you have been running on and the things that you are finding to be the most important. What are those top 2 or 3 things though, right? There could be a list of 100 things, but what are the top priorities that you find to be the things that keep you up at night, Ravi?
I believe first and foremost that the number one way to achieve equity, all of us are talking about equity in this race, and I think that's something that we should all be proud of, that we have a race of at-large candidates here in the District of Columbia where everyone's talking about equity. That's important. We should pat ourselves in the back about that as a community, because that has not always been the case. However, what that means is different, and I'm the only candidate that, since my website launched in August, that I have said from the beginning about what equity means. And to me, what it means is moving the upward mobility ladder up for all teachers, for parents, and of course, for students, because we have an obligation as elected officials to ensure that everyone is reaching their fullest potential. So equity to me is not just a buzzword about providing resources or redistributing dollars. That's what government does all the time. That is not unique. We need to be redistributing more dollars to targeted communities. We need to ensure that the resources that are allocated from city council actually get to the principals who can distribute those budgets to their classrooms and to the teachers that run the departments in those schools for the needs of the students. And that isn't always happening either. And so equity for me, the primary way to solve it is through creating a 21st century inclusive curriculum. And that to me centers on what it is that we know, because we don't know what we don't know. We will all die being ignorant in most things. Please call me to talk about politics and education in urban communities. Don't call me to talk about engineering and chemistry. I can't help you with that. And that's okay. You know, we have brilliant other folks, particularly Black leaders, many of whom are from here in DC, who have, you know, made the change in those fields as well. But for us to assume that ignorance is a bad thing, I think is the kind of culture fight against the war against truth that we have been undergirded with as a result of this Trump administration. We are facing a very dangerous situation this weekend where our lives are on the line, where we have a president who is literally endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, who has equivocated on Charlottesville, has a Secretary of Education that has gutted public schools. And this is something that to me is unacceptable. It's not a policy point. This is about life and death. And it begins with what we know. And so if we're graduating students who never heard of the Middle Passage, who don't know Seneca Falls, who've never heard of the Combahee River Statement, who do not discuss these issues in concert with whatever they're learning, whether it be at the kindergarten level with pictures and images, or be the senior high school level in AP classes. Yes. We need to be ensuring that students are learning the cultural and diversity curriculum that is global and local, yes. But that is diverse and inclusive of all people, queer folks, disabled folks, women. This is what we've seen already in California, in Oregon, and even in Mike Pence's Indiana, in New Jersey, in Connecticut. And it's about time we bring it here to the district that should be a state. And so this is one of the my priority issues. And the second priority issue, I would say, is ending the digital divide. It's frustrating to me that every time I drive home to my house here in Ward 7 in Parkside, I cross the bridge and I literally drop 2 cell bars on my cell phone. When I moved here, I literally had to change my company. I'm not allegiance to Sprint, but I had Sprint ever since I was a kid. And not until I moved here did I have to change companies, because literally my cell phone did not work in my house. And that's dangerous, right? And so imagine not only the danger that ensues, but the students and their families who can't even log on. If you can't log on, then you can't learn. If you can't learn, then where's the public education dollars going? So this to me are two very important issues that we have to get right, because if we don't get it right, then all of us are in jeopardy. And that to me is unacceptable. And that's why I got in the race.
Thank you for clearing that up. All important issues, and equity, and the digital divide. I'm experiencing that right now. I'm a teacher. I'm interfacing with students and families every single day. And every single day we're trying to figure out, how can we get a hotspot to them? How can we get the technology to be adequate or just excellent, or at least just working, so that they can just learn? That they're trying to show up. They just need to have the opportunity to be able to learn. So I agree with you there. Another sort of hot topic happening right now. So you talked about equity. You talked a little bit about funding. You talked about the importance of students being exposed to their culture and a global view. Let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about schools reopening, right? I don't know about you, but I just looked up and realized it was almost Halloween. It is Halloween, and it's been about 8 months, and we thought we'd be out for 2 weeks. What do you think about the school reopening plan? Is it time for us to go back to school? Should our little people go and the older people? What's your position?
So I wake up every single morning with a compromised immune system. I was diagnosed with HIV when I was 21 years old as a junior in college at the University of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I've also I am a COVID survivor. I mention these things because health is the number one priority that we all have to have. None of us can reach our God-given potential if we aren't first taking care of our mental, spiritual, and our physical health to ensure that we are the best for ourselves, and therefore we can be the best for some other people. I live every day. I'm grateful to wake up with a 76-year-old mom who has Alzheimer's now. I understand the importance of care from cradle to grave. My 87-year-old dad, God bless him, is well and in his right mind, but he's 87. And that comes along with some challenges as well. And so I mention all of that context because I have been around the need to care for the health of loved ones as one of 3 children in my family for well over 2 decades now, between grandparents and my elderly parents. And so I know firsthand that when we are putting young people in harm's way, when we're putting the teachers and the parents and the groundskeepers and the school crossing guards and the cafeteria workers all in harm's way, who live in communities, who shop in neighborhoods, who have devoted their lives to this district that should be a state, and we're going to say that they should just come into school and let's hope the best. That to me is an unacceptable strategy. I understand the position that the mayor is in. I've written 3 books on mayors. I'm an expert on urban policy and how to get stuff done for minority communities in the urban setting. That's my area of expertise. I'm an American political scientist, but I study urban issues. And principally, I've done work in urban communities talking about Black mayors and what they've done for Black people in fiscally conservative environments and in ideologically difficult circumstances where they have to fight those who disagree vehemently to get done what needs to happen for minority communities, particularly in places that are low income. That's what I've written 3 books about, and a theory called targeted universalism. I encourage everyone to look up. It's the theory that I certainly have brought to the fore as it relates to achieving the interests of minority groups in a pluralistic society. And let's be clear, DC is gentrifying. It's gentrified. We aren't as chocolate as we used to be, but we are still chocolate. And I think it's important, and the school system certainly still is. And I think that our health has to be the number one priority, because it is people of color, young and old, that are more likely to get COVID. There are people of color who are more likely to be members of the frontline professions that are saving the lives. I was born premature, weighed 1 pound, 15 ounces when I was born. Nurses saved my life, and many of those nurses were people of color, and certainly all of them were women. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge that none of us get through this world by ourselves, and we have to have our health be the center cornerstone of our ability to be our best. And so the plan to me is insufficient because it's morally compromising in the current state that it is in, and that we're putting children, young people, elementary students, babies, in harm's way without a guarantee for personal protection equipment for teachers like yourself who've been working for over a decade in the schools. They should be getting N95 masks. It should be delivered to their house. It should be free. It should be daily. If you're going to put people in harm's way, then you need to provide for them the care so that they can do the skills, create the skills in these students that we need them to do. But we don't need teachers to be risking their lives, because if they do that, then where are the teachers going to be in a couple of weeks? If they get COVID and the teachers get sick, then what are you going to do? Start hiring a bunch of unskilled workers to then teach these students? It's just simply is a plan that I think we should hit pause on. I've said from the beginning in my website that no one should be forced to go back to school. That's either a student or an employee throughout 2020. Every major university here in the district that should be a state has closed throughout the entire semester, throughout 2020. And, you know, I think that the public school system and the mayor and all of the leadership that she controls should be considering something similar as well, with the exception for our students who are special education, disabled students. I hate these terms, but those are the terms that we use in politics. Otherwise abled folks who do need the individual person-to-person learning, and that is important. And I will end with this. We have to get back ASAP because we do know that the virtual space does create even worse conditions for example, reading proficiency. I saw a report just yesterday that came out in the Washington Post, which is genuinely embarrassing. People should be embarrassed, but I think we've become so numb by these numbers that we've become complacent by them. But we have a system right now where a majority of these Black students in our schools cannot even read at grade level. That has to be unacceptable. People should be pissed about that. I certainly am. I don't even have kids in the schools, and I'm pissed about it. This is unacceptable. We have to be more than just a collection of residents. We've got to be a community, and that requires every single DC resident, whether you moved here 10 days ago or you've been here 10 generations. We have a collective obligation to provide the resources for every single student and teacher and person and employee who works in DCPS, because we genuinely are all in this together. If students don't have what they need to be successful, and that begins with protecting their health and prioritizing their health and the health of their instructors and the staff that engage with them, if that isn't the priority, then we simply cannot be the beacon to the rest of the world that we have to be, because we are the nation's capital. So we got to lead the world. We don't have an option there.
Yeah. I hear you, Ravi. I hear you saying that it's a life or death issue. It's not a politics issue here. We're talking about life or death. And you talked about what we need to do to make sure that students have the best instructors in front of them, right? Like healthy instructors that are like sound and prepared and enabled and empowered and with everything that they need to be successful. So speaking of that, I would love to talk about the talent that we bring into our schools and the talent that we put in front of our kids, right? So of course, COVID, it's a major issue, but before COVID, right, there were so many other issues that were already there that suddenly, now that we have the time to sort of be more still, all of these things are being illuminated now. One of those is this issue of the impact evaluation system in DC. So the teacher evaluation system, you know, some people have great things to say about it because it's somewhat standardized. And so everyone is sort of being rated on, a certain amount of criteria in certain areas. What are your views about teacher evaluation, either in DC or what that should look like? Because we have people benefiting, right, with bonuses, people who are deemed highly effective, but you also have teachers, so that whole system was designed to keep the good teachers, right, and get rid of the teachers who are not performing. Are we going about it the right way with the impact evaluation system? And you also have the charter system that, you know, has more autonomy on because they have their own LEA, a lot of them. And so they get to do evaluation however they'd like. And so what are your views on teacher evaluation here in the district and where it stands and maybe the direction we should be going in?
So this is a great question, which is why, I know you are a great teacher because you understand the power of assessment. Assessment matters. I'm a department chair. I am both someone who teaches, engages with parents every single day, but also assesses teacher performance as the chair of the department. And so I've been doing that at various universities that I've had the privilege to work at. And I've been invited to do so occasionally in nonprofit settings with community organizations throughout the country that I've had a pleasure to work with. And I say that to begin by saying assessment has to happen. We do have to have some type of standardized measures to see what people are doing in their classrooms. And I think great teachers like yourself don't mind being assessed, right? Don't mind being evaluated. The issue is not that. The issue is how that assessment is being administered. What are the questions? What are the metrics? What are the benchmarks? And how is it being equitably applied? And these are the questions that I think every single teacher has a right to be asking, because what's been proven with the impact system, everyone says, oh, well, this is what we have to do because we have to follow the Obama rule. Well, no, the Obama rule says you've got to come up with a system in which to do assessment. It does not say that system has to be this. Yes. And so I think we need to remind ourselves of that. Let's not get comfortable with kind of where we are in our stride, so to speak. Like, I ran track for much of my youth. I understand that you have to finish strong. I think we started this effort correctly by creating a community conversation, recognizing we had to do something different with this new Obama legislation that came out several years ago. And the impact system that came out of that process is better than what was there. It, however, is not the end. And we should not stop there. We have to be committed to constantly reevaluating our own evaluation processes. This is what we have to do constantly at the collegiate level. We do it annually, and I think we need to be doing it annually as well at the K through 12 level. Here's what I think should not happen in impact. One, we should not have teacher performance attached to how well their class does on standardized tests. We have teachers now that are being conveniently let go, are not being invited to return to the classroom because their students didn't do well on a standardized test that we've known for decades has been proven to create racist, segregated outcomes for young people. I mean, people seem to pretend as though we don't have the brilliance in our Black community to remember Brown versus Board, to remember segregation, to remember that one of the biggest battles in American racial history has been on public education. Right. They do not want us to learn our histories. They do not want teachers to be able to have the tools to use their own creative brilliance to bring out the individual aptitude at the highest level for every single student. They want people to be forced to do standardized measures to decrease the number of high performing outcomes. And this leads to this type of horrible literacy rates that we've got today. I mean, we have to be embarrassed by this. When we have,
we have to be pissed off about it.
That's what pissed off about it, yes, and embarrassed. Please be pissed off about this. And whoever you vote for, continue to be pissed off about this. We cannot be doing victory laps by any elected official or any neighborhood organization, as long as we've got a majority of our Black and brown kids who fundamentally do not have the skills to be successful. That is our fault, not their fault. It's our fault as adults who have the responsibility to govern their educational success. And that's why I decided to run for this State Board of Education at-large seat. And at-large was important because I wanted to ensure that every single DC student, every ward, I don't care where you live or what your income is or whether you bus or walk or metro it, however you got there before COVID, and whether you're going in your living room or your basement or you're sitting on your bed during COVID and learning, you got to have the computer, the tablet, you should not be doing homework on your cell phone. And you have to have high-speed internet. And these things that need to happen today. And the father of the digital divide lives here in DC. DC is a brilliant city. So I study cities. So this is what really frustrates me about DC, is that DC has the resources to have the #1 education system in the country. The money is here. Taxes don't have to be raised. We have to redistribute that money. That's a little bit about what the defund movement is about. I think the messaging could be improved, frankly, and I've written about that. But the general point there is that we need to be targeting dollars toward the places needed most. And certainly civic dollars coming from taxpayer resources should be going to the places where taxpayers need relief. And I don't think that's unusual. And I don't think that the request of many of our progressive allies and Black Lives Matter and other groups is somehow out there in left field. This is the basic question in municipal governance. And how do you get the dollars that are raised to the people who need it most? And what we have in DC is a history of that not happening. And as someone who's an expert on Black politics, it's happened in many instances over decades of Black leadership. So to remember that not every Black person is supporting us. I don't know what folks, believe necessarily in terms of their attitudes in the Black community generally, but 80+% of us in DC identify as Democrats. And there are folks like, Clarence Thomas and others, right, who live in Washington, D.C., who are Black, who, let's be clear, are not fighting for our interests. We have to fight for our interests. When you go to the polls on Tuesday, whoever you vote for, whatever issue, the question Black folks need to be asking is, what does this person do or say from our interests? In other words, what can they do to actually get what I want, get it done? I don't know about y'all, but I'm impatient. I don't want to be coming, I'm not doing this to run for another political position in several years and all that. God's blessed me, who knows what happens tomorrow. I'm living for today. And right now, these issues are a priority for me because I've devoted my life to young people. And it really is very sad to see when you're in a place where you've got the resources, you have the general moderate ideological congruence, meaning that most of us agree, most of us are Democrats. So we have a general sense of how things should go. It should go left. No pun intended, on Tuesday, or actually the pun is deliberately intended there. Should go left on Tuesday. And in DC, that's been the case. But we need to be honest that not every Black elected official has done the best for Black communities. We need to be honest that not every friend, not every person that we've known, that we may love in our personal settings and may be great community advocates, that doesn't mean they're the best person to be able to get done what you need done in the institutions of power. I believe I am, because I'm the only policy expert in the race, that I know how to get the stuff done that we need done. I'm not talking about Black and ethnic studies without already knowing how to do that. Like, I think we have to stop selling people a bill of goods that creates disillusionment. And I think a lot of us do this nationwide. It's cross parties. It's not limited to Black folks, certainly isn't limited to DC, but where we get excited about ideas that don't have the real strong possibility of getting accomplished. And that leads to disillusionment, where people then get excited about, oh, I'm going to get free this, I'm going to get free that. And then you get elected and you don't create free this or free that. And then you wonder why they don't come out and vote next time. Well, because you told them that they would get something that they haven't gotten. So it's really simple, people. Stop telling folks what you can't produce. I'm talking about stuff that I can produce because I've done it throughout my career, and I'm excited to bring that here to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. We're excited. We're excited, Ravi. I know I'm fired up even just at the idea that you're a policy expert. I want to be clear. You said you wrote something recently on targeted universalism. Is that what you called it?
Yeah. So I've written, so my first 3 books. My first book was Black Mayors, White Majorities. I hope that folks look that book up, where I'm talking about my native Ohio and looking at Black elected officials elected in predominantly white spaces. What do you do for Black folks when the city isn't majority Black? And it's very important for places like DC to understand this, because unfortunately, the city is losing some of its chocolate color. That is going to require us to figure out, how do we maintain the realization of Black interests in a city, in a district that should be a state, that is consistently losing some of that color. And my work has all been about how to do that. And so I'm hoping that it's timely, as we in DC are going through this literally right now. And how can you stay Black? Well, you can stay, even if you don't look as Black, you can, the policies can still stay Black. but you got to have folks in office who know how to do that. And it requires more than just being around a long time or having been involved in certain intricate, important battles in the community. That has to have been the case as well. But you also ultimately have to have the know-how and the knowledge to pull the levers of power. Otherwise, you're going to be coming back to voters in 2-3 years, asking for the same thing and hoping that they didn't remember that you didn't do it last time.
Right.
So
how the trust is lost because you didn't do it last time. I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. You also talked about that the funding is there, right? Like this is not a lack of resources conversation that we need to be having. And so I'm curious, and even just reading up on the things that are important to you, you talked about plans for public versus charter schools. And so my question here is around school choice and whether, right, because even though this is a city that's almost, some people would say, monopolized by charters, right? Like there's so many charter schools, so many people saying, I wanna get a school started. Can I get my school authorized? And boom, there's a school. But then we also know that the DCPS schools are very under-enrolled in a lot of cases. And so as a child leaves their neighborhood or their DCPS school to go to a charter, what happens then? Are we on the right track with school choice and parents being able to say, you know what, even if you have to ride the train an hour from here, at least it's a quality school? Like, what are your thoughts around school choice in DC and that landscape?
So just like with the impact discussion we were having earlier, I think that where we are is better than where we were prior to the choice movement hitting DC, but we cannot stop here. I mean, again, it's morally objectionable to me that we here in the nation's capital, where students should have the best access to the best everything because we are in the shadow of democracy, of the free world. Instead, what we have is a system where, like with impact, the charter schools have improved, but and have improved in some cases the standards in DCPS, to be clear as well. But the question is, at what expense? And is this something that can be sustainable? And to me, the lottery has just every kind of moral kind of objectionable tone to it. I mean, as someone who's not a DC native, let me explain it this way, the way it appears, I think, to some of us who aren't natives. This is the nation's capital. So we literally are saying that kids here, families here in the nation's capital have to hope that they win the lottery to ensure that they just might get a shot at the American dream. That has to be ridiculous. And that's also, by the way, inherently not equitable. And as much as you might like to make a lottery as fair as possible, I don't know about you, but I played the lottery. Sometimes you win $1, sometimes you might win $50. Most times you don't win anything. And regardless, the point is, do we want to be putting our children's future? And by the way, by their future, that means our entire futures as well, because all of us will get old one day and those children will be governing our lives. And so this isn't, if we need to be selfish about it, maybe that's what we need to be. This is a collective responsibility because we need young people to be brilliant so that they can change the world. And when we are older, they can take care of us. And we need them to do so, right, with the competent skills that are necessary. The choice movement, I get. My mother, again, a public school teacher in Ohio for her whole career, we lived across the street from a Black elementary school like I do now. I live across the street from Neville Thomas, named for a Black man from Ohio like myself who's done work at NAACP like I have as well. I was the first openly gay Black NAACP president elected in the country in 2012 when I lived in Massachusetts. And so I understand the importance of engaging with community organizations to make change. And with the school I grew up across the street from in Ohio was underperforming, and my mom wanted us to go elsewhere. So pre-choice, she just broke the school rules and enrolled her kids in a different public school. And even that wasn't acceptable for her. And eventually our grandparents paid for us to shift temporarily to private education for a teacher, again, who taught in the public schools, who didn't even send her own kids to those same schools. That should tell you the systemic structural problem that urban public education has been facing across the country, and particularly here in the District of Columbia, for far, far, far too long. And so that has resulted in families being squeezed and having to make the best decisions they can under less than ideal circumstances with limited resources and needing immediate results. And that's why you end up having a student on a bus or on a metro taking an hour and a half ride to a charter school. And many of them are like over here in 7 and 8, where I live, who are on public transportation for 1-2+ hours a day each way.
Yes.
And then you wonder why they're tired when they get home. You expect them to like do homework?
Yeah.
Like that's not, it's not an ideal scenario on the national level, right? We've seen this in public education. My last book was on the Little Rock Nine and the desegregation crisis, published with my mother in 1957, talking about, again, the importance of public education as a civil rights issue that motivates Black people to vote. And my hope is that that is still the case this time, because while folks are going to the polls with Trump on their minds, and I hope it is, because we need him to go.
Right.
Make that very clear where my opinions are there. But we need to be caring about these local races and not just voting for people haphazardly. I encourage folks to read websites, to really think about these decisions. Now, I've met on the campaign trail so many folks who are very much excited about the future in DC, but I've also met a lot of folks who simply were unaware about this race. And so I can't thank you enough, Kendall, for this conversation, because in my opinion, you are one of the few in DC media circles, both local and kind of national, that's based here in DC, that has cared to cover this race in detail. And I think that we need to do more of that. We've seen a piece here, a piece there, but there hasn't really been a comprehensive story on public education. I think the reason for that is because the state board lost a lot of its power, right, as a result of mayoral control. If we are emphasizing that students are the priority here, then regardless of the level of quote unquote power affiliated with the board, we know that there's a bully pulpit. And we know there's that symbolic power means everything in American politics. And we certainly need people in these seats that are going to make this change happen. I believe in shared standards, though, to get back to this question and so we can move on. Shared standards, every school, whether it's a public charter or a neighborhood school, needs to have the exact same standards, because every student in DC, whether you go to a Catholic school, whether you go to a private school, whether you go to a public school, I think we have an obligation as residents to say, I want to know when I shake your hand across that graduation stage, I know that you know these things.
Yes.
We have a civic interest in knowing that you know what the electoral college is. There is a cultural interest in you knowing 1619. There's a pedagogical intersectional interest in you understanding Native American rights, LGBTQ history, women's history movement, etc. And you being able to navigate the world better because you understand the genuine diversity thereof. This is something just where I think we have to be. And what's exciting about it for me is that, regardless win, lose, or draw, we actually have the power, again, I want to emphasize, to do that in DC. So when folks tell you, you can't do this, you can't do that, what they're telling you is that I don't know how to change the policy to make that happen. Well, I do. And I've been studying it. I've got a PhD in political science from Brown, a bachelor's degree from University of Michigan. I have 3 degrees in this stuff. I've been doing it my whole life. Doesn't mean I get it right every time, because ultimately I've got to be engaged with the community and listening to voices like you every single day, whether it be text or a voicemail or a coffee on the street corner, because in community is how we make change happen. But choice has resulted because the schools were in disrepair. Mayoral choice has resulted because the schools were in disrepair. And we need to be honest about this. There was Black elected officials in a Black school district for decades that was not taking care of these Black kids. We need to be honest about this. Some of them may be our friends or our community members, long-term DC politicals, but we need to be honest. We're not in the situation we're in now where majority of our students can't read at grade level by accident. And when you've had Black control of Black schools for 30+ years, who do you have to blame? other than ourselves.
Honestly.
So as someone who teaches at the Mecca and who was Black before I was a political scientist, this stuff is, not a political talking point for me. I was that Black boy who was in public school who no one knew how to deal with me because I was just a rambunctious kid and they didn't understand. I was that Black boy in Montessori school, the only kid in the school, first to graduate that was Black. Male in my school. I played that role as well. I understand what it means to be isolated. I also understand what it means to be lost in a crowd because no one expects you to have the potential that you have. You're just one of the many Black faces that they see in front of them. I've experienced all of that, and I hope that that experience can be helpful if I'm elected on Tuesday to come to the board to say, hey, I don't care what school you go to. I do care that that school has the resources that it needs to guarantee your success. This should not be, again, subject to a lottery or optional. We should not be doing victory laps in public education or in government service when on a scale of 500, reading proficiency for 4th and 8th grade, on a scale, I want to emphasize, a scale of 500, we have been in the mid 220s, 230s, 240s. And while, there's been improvement, which is what the mayor and her team, et cetera, and any mayor, by the way, so it's not about Bowser, it's about any mayor and their team is going to highlight successes. That's what politicians do, y'all. So don't expect anything else. That's what they're going to do. And there have been successes, but it's been far too slow. It's been far too little. And the investments are not as transparent, perhaps, as they should be. I believe in tracking every single dollar. This is 2020. I should be able to go to a website and look at a timeline of every single second of every dollar that is spent in DC public schools. We don't have that level of transparency, and it's about time we get it.
It's about time. It's about time. We don't have any more time, is what I'm realizing, is that we have to be urgent about all of these issues because our children don't have any more time. And so, Ravi, I have so enjoyed this conversation. My last question is just anything else that you might want to add, that you sort of your last final thoughts to the people as I'm about to go to the polls today, as they are going to the polls throughout between today and Tuesday. What are some final words? And then how can we find you? How can we find you, your website, and any social media information that you might want to share?
I appreciate you, Kendall. First of all, thank you for being a teacher. I was raised by teachers. Because of their influence, I chose to be a teacher. My sister devoted her life to youth development. My brother as well, who works in youth sports leadership programs. And so, this has been a lifetime commitment in my family. And here in DC, again, my aunt Frances taught in DC public schools for over 30 years, taught music education. And so I decided to jump in this race on a family lineage and legacy of devoting our lives to ensuring young people have the tools they need to really be successful and to genuinely lead in this world. I think it's time out for complacency, and I think it's time out for more of the same. Because our students and our young people in schools deserve each and every day to know that we are doing the best we can for them. And so my website is Ravi Perry, 4dc.com, Ravi Perry for DC.com. We are out in the field, all 8 wards today and tomorrow and Monday, and of course on election day. If you want to help us out, I hope that you can please provide the sign up sheet at our website, the information that we can get in contact with you. And whether you support me or not, I do hope you support mandating Black studies because we need to be teaching Black history. I do hope you support mandating LGBTQ history because there's more LGBTQ people in DC than anywhere else, and you're more likely to identify as LGBTQ if you're Black and brown than if you're Caucasian. And so we in the Black community should be emphasizing the importance of intersectional Blackness, and we should be teaching it in public schools. And if you believe like I do that you can't learn in the virtual space if you don't have a computer and a tablet and it doesn't have high-speed internet, and that you think every household that has DCPS students in it should in fact get free Wi-Fi, then those are some reasons to vote for me. You'll find some others on my website, But even if you choose not to vote for me, and I mean this in all sincerity, I'm an educator. I'm gonna be an educator on November 4th, on November 5th, 6th, etc. It's my life's work. And so I hope to see each and every one of you on the battlefield, and whether it be a street corner, whether it be the mayor's office at a rally, or whether it be at your kitchen table with your student and your family that you're trying to get up to a certain reading level. We need to call on and lean on each other. This is not optional for me. This is not about politics to me. I got in this race to ensure that we had the best person in this at-large seat to move policy in the interest of our students and this majority Black and minority school district. And it's about time that I think that we have someone in the at-large seat, certainly, that is the antithesis of everything that Donald Trump and his administration under the leadership, and particularly in education, of Betsy DeVos has stood for. And for the last 4 years in DC, we allowed, 4 years ago, we allowed a Trump supporter to win this at-large seat. We cannot do that ever again. And whether it's me or someone of the other 5 or 6 candidates on the ballot, I do hope that you vote in this at-large DC State Board of Education race. God bless you. And I encourage everyone to participate, particularly those of us in Divine Nine orgs. I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, Washington, D.C. alumni chapter. We need to be getting out. Of course, you know, I know the AKAs are excited. We got a, Black woman who's going to be our next VP. And I don't know about y'all, but if it weren't for Black women, I wouldn't be here. And so this is an exciting opportunity we have to vote for real, genuine change that reflects your interest, not just what you believe in, but reflects your interest, so that we can actually solve these problems that we're talking about and move on to another issue. So God bless you, Kendall. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robbie. I'll be seeing you soon, and this will be up as soon as I can get it up. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.